The door sighed open with a hiss that sounded vaguely disappointed, as if even the ship itself had expected more from this prisoner. Queen Shirella stepped inside the chamber with the steady, predatory grace of someone who had long since stopped needing to prove anything. The soles of her boots made no sound on the biometal floor, an affectation engineered into her footwear by a species her people had long since conquered. She stood tall, regal, wrapped in living armor that shimmered with dull silver heat, the edges of it breathing in sync with her heart. The walls glowed faintly, as if anticipating screams. But there were none. Instead, the human sat cross-legged on the floor, arms resting lazily on his knees, looking up at her as if he were mildly curious whether she'd brought him lunch. "Name," she said, her voice low and crisp, sharpened to a point after years of drilling answers from trembling mouths. He blinked once, then gave a slow nod as though considering her question in the context of a philosophical treatise. "I'm going to go with Eli. Unless you've already got an Eli on board, then maybe I could be like Dave. I don't want to confuse your spreadsheet." She narrowed her eyes. The translator implanted behind her ear chirped once, as if it too was struggling to adapt. She tried again. "Rank, affiliation." "Oh, I see," he said, lifting a finger. "You're doing the intimidating dominator thing." Yeah, I read about this in Interrogation for Dummies. You glower, I tremble, secrets spill like soup. It's cute." She stepped forward and the room cooled 2 degrees in acknowledgement. She let the silence gather behind her words like a tidal wave. "You are aboard a Virex dreadnought, surrounded by weapons that could erase continents. Your species is classified as pre-threshold. You will answer my questions or you will suffer." Eli tilted his head. "Okay, but quick question. How do you define suffer? Because I stubbed my toe this morning on the edge of your weird alien toilet, and frankly, I'm already there." That threw her, just for a moment. A flicker, not visible to her guards, not even audible in her breath, but the translator buzzed uncertainly, as if it didn't believe it had parsed that correctly. He leaned forward, grinning now. "I mean, you guys beam people across light years, but toilet seats are still a menace. Real design oversight." She studied him, unarmed, unarmored, disrespectful. His biometrics showed no elevated pulse, no cortisol spike, no sweat. Not even a nervous fidget. She'd interrogated warlords who screamed before she'd even touched them, generals who wept into their own restraints. But this mechanic? He acted like she was the entertainment. She circled slowly, letting her armor whisper across the silence. "Why were you on Vega 7? "Officially, repairing a fusion stabilizer on an outpost that definitely wasn't collapsing because someone used duct tape on a coolant pipe." He paused. "Unofficially, hiding from my supervisor. Guy smells like wet carpet." The translator beeped twice. She tapped it irritably. "Do you not fear death?" He looked at her for a long moment, then shrugged. "I mean, I do. But I fear you'll start explaining your political structure more." That almost earned a smirk from her. She stopped in front of him, inches away, close enough to see the scar just under his eye, the one shaped like a broken crescent. A soldier's wound, maybe, or a kitchen mishap involving a grapefruit. With humans, it was hard to tell. "I could end you with a thought," she said. He nodded solemnly. "And I could clog your ship's plumbing with one poorly timed flush. We all have our weapons." The guards tensed. Her armor flexed with irritation, but then silence again. And in it, something strange. She'd come here expecting weakness, obedience, fear. But now, staring into those maddeningly casual eyes, she found herself wondering something she hadn't in decades. Why wasn't he afraid? And more dangerously, why did she find that refreshing? The queen entered the chamber again, though this time the doors made a different sound, less a disappointed hiss, more of an exhausted sigh. She suspected the ship was beginning to feel the same frustration she was. Eli was still seated in the same relaxed position, but now he had stacked 4 small rations containers into a precarious tower beside him, which he eyed with deep, meditative focus. She didn't speak right away. She simply stared. He glanced up. "Ah, my favorite interrogator. Back for round 2? She did not reply. I was just thinking, he continued, carefully adjusting the top container with surgical precision. This tower might symbolize our relationship. Delicate balance, shaky foundation, and probably ending in disaster. But artistic, no? She took one step forward. The motion made the containers collapse in a clatter. Exactly, Eli muttered, gesturing at the mess. See? Symbolism. She didn't let her amusement show. Not that it mattered. He'd already noticed the faint twitch at the corner of her mouth. Of course he had. Your presence on Vega 7 was unauthorized. You entered a restricted combat zone. Your presence led to the compromise of Virex intelligence. That is not art. That is sabotage. He raised both hands innocently. If your intelligence was compromised because I tripped over a power conduit and accidentally triggered a station-wide alert, that's on you. You set off a 5-kiloton reactor spike. By accident. Who puts a self-destruct system next to a coffee dispenser? Terrans do not drink methyl ether concentrate. That was not coffee. Well, now I know. She exhaled slowly, counted to 3, and recentered her focus. Across the chamber, her guards stood like statues, though she knew they were trading mental bets on how long this one would last before his brain finally melted from boredom or high-frequency sound pulses. Your species lacks basic warp field shielding. You are barely capable of orbital maneuvers. You do not possess telepathic resistance. Why do you mock a force that could erase your sun? He nodded thoughtfully. That's a fair point. But then again, we also make cheese that never molds, and television shows that run for 40 seasons. I'd say we're tough in weird ways. She blinked, slowly. Let me ask you something now, he said, sitting up straighter. You interrogate people a lot, right? Professionally, I mean. She tilted her head. Of course. So, ever just get tired of it? Tired of victory? No, tired of talking. Like you ask the same questions, they give the same answers. Eventually someone cries or explodes. Gets predictable. Don't you ever want to mix it up? Throw in a joke. Maybe try interpretive dance? That last part made the younger guard flinch audibly, then pretend he hadn't. The queen, for her part, said nothing. But something had shifted. His words didn't just bounce off her this time. They hovered, hung in the charged air, like vaporized curiosity. I have refined my methods over 83 interrogations, she said at last. I do not require variety. Eli grinned. Wow, that's a lot of one-sided conversations. No wonder you're cranky. Her eyes narrowed. He leaned back again. Tell you what, you answer one of my questions, just one, and I'll answer yours properly. Honest to stardust. You are not in a position to negotiate. I'm in a position to entertain. Big difference. She considered. Silence ticked between them. It wasn't the silence of dominance anymore. It was the silence of thought. Ask. He seemed momentarily surprised. Really? Okay. He scratched his head as if he hadn't expected to get this far. What did you dream about last night? She stared. He looked sincere. And she, weaponized, flawless, Empress of 12 systems, did not have an answer. She'd had dreams, yes, but they were like dust, always gone by waking, and no one had ever asked, especially not like that. The next session began with unexpected background music. Not official Virex protocol, of course. It was Eli, humming what he claimed was a classic Terran battle anthem, though to her ears it sounded like the mating call of a malfunctioning aquatic beast. He was drumming his fingers on the floor, keeping a steady rhythm while he sang. I want to break free. I want to break. She silenced him with a glance. He paused, holding the final note dramatically in the air. You don't like Queen? Ironic. She stepped forward, armor gleaming faintly, and stood over him. You were given the opportunity to provide tactical data in exchange for favorable confinement. You instead requested a pillow and a pet. I stand by that request, he said, hands folded. You folks need emotional support creatures on this ship. Might help with morale. Your guard on the left looks like he hasn't blinked since yesterday. The guard in question blinked immediately. Then again, furiously, as if to prove he was definitely a blinker. I do not understand your continued insolence, she said. Are you attempting to provoke me? He shrugged. Not really, I just figured if I'm gonna rot in a cell on a spaceship full of glowing-eyed space royalty, I might as well enjoy the show. There is no show. This is not entertainment. That's your first mistake, he said, pointing. Everything's entertainment if you survive long enough. Her gaze lingered on him, unreadable. The room's temperature adjusted slightly in response to her growing mood, dimming the lights by 2 degrees Kelvin. The ship, it seemed, was learning to accommodate her silences. She sat. The guard stiffened. It was the first time she had chosen to take a seat opposite a prisoner. Eli blinked. Oh, wow. Did you just make this an interview? Should I be writing this down? She ignored him. Your home world is fractured. Your governments disagree even on the measurement of time. You burn fuels that poison your own skies. Why should I treat you as an equal intelligence? Well, when you put it that way, he said, it sounds pretty bad. But we also made portable pizza ovens, and once sent a car into orbit just because someone dared us. That is not evidence of advanced thinking. True, he said, but it's very human. She leaned forward slightly, curious despite herself. You embrace chaos? He tilted his head. We embrace the possibility that chaos might sometimes lead to better things, or at least better stories. There was a pause, then he added, also, we're great at improvising. Give a human a paperclip and a wire, and we'll build you a toaster, or a bomb, sometimes both. She considered this. You place faith in failure. He nodded. You ever try to cook without screwing up a few meals first? I do not cook. Oh, you're missing out. Cooking is 80% science, 10% fire, 10% yelling at fire, and whatever's left is usually edible. She looked at him. And the purpose of this ritual? Bringing people together, sharing, celebrating that no matter how weird or messed up things get, we're still here, still eating, still trying. She didn't answer. For a moment, the only sound was the low hum of the ship's artificial core, pulsing beneath them like a heartbeat. You never answered my question, he said quietly. She raised an eyebrow. Your dream. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I saw stars, unformed, infinite, but quiet, he smiled. See? Even your subconscious is tired of all this noise. And without quite meaning to, she smiled too. Just the corner of her mouth, the smallest curve. But her guards noticed. The lights noticed. Even the ship blinked in surprise. The alarm blared at precisely the wrong time. Eli had just convinced one of the guards, through sheer relentless badgering, to explain the basics of Virex cuisine when the chamber lights snapped from their usual moody glow to emergency red. The hum of the ship's artificial gravity stuttered, flickered, and then gave up entirely. Eli immediately began to float. Well, he muttered, slowly rotating upside down, this escalated quickly. The Queen entered half a second later, flanked by 2 guards who were clearly doing their best to look dignified while bouncing gently off the walls. Status, she snapped, stabilizing herself by gripping a ceiling rail. One of the guards, mid-spin, accidentally saluted sideways. Core sub-level breach, came the clipped response from her communicator. Subspace filament rupture. Engineering bay compromised. Eli, now drifting in slow circles, pointed a finger. Is that the one I suggested you stop storing volatile crystals next to the air fresheners? She ignored him and pushed off toward the exit. But before she could vanish through the doorway, his voice floated after her. You're welcome to leave me here, of course. I'll just organize a zero-gravity yoga session with your guards. Maybe start a book club. She stopped, hovered there. A sigh almost escaped. Then she kicked off the frame and returned to him. You know anything useful about warp field containment? I mean, he said, spinning lazily, define useful. Define it yourself, she said, unclipping the restraints from the wall. You're coming with me. Moments later, they were navigating the bowels of the dreadnought, corridors pulsing with flickers of emergency light. Gravity hiccuped in and out like a faulty personality setting. Engineers barked orders, cables snapped, and coolant sprayed across a bulkhead. Eli pointed as they ducked a sparking conduit. You know, I'd really love to speak to whoever decided to run high-voltage lines next to the elevator music system. Priorities. Focus, she barked, tossing him a tool module. You said you repaired Terran stabilizers. Can you recalibrate a hyperconduit? Not unless your hyperconduits also respond to desperate pleading and percussive maintenance. She shoved him into a maintenance bay. Inside, half the systems were glowing the sort of color usually associated with immediate evacuation. The other half were smoking. Eli got to work, muttering, Okay, so this goes here. Probably. And this bit definitely wasn't supposed to be melting. She watched him with cautious interest. For someone whose daily agenda mostly involved wisecracks and sabotage by sarcasm, he moved with alarming competence. Need me to hold anything? She asked. Yes, your breath and your judgment. She actually chuckled, only briefly. Then the panel before them emitted a deep metallic cough. Okay, that's new, Eli muttered, eyes wide. The Queen stepped forward, examining the readout. You rerouted the auxiliary field through the coil array. I rerouted it through whatever wasn't actively on fire. The ship gave a lurch. Gravity returned, dropping them both to the floor with a solid thud. Eli groaned, flat on his back. I think I just met your emergency bulkhead with my spine. The lights stabilized. The alarms went quiet. Somewhere, a distant hatch slammed shut with the relieved finality of a story that didn't end in fire. She stood over him, arms folded. You saved my ship. He propped himself up on one elbow. And you still haven't brought me a pillow. Shameful. For the first time, her expression softened, not out of amusement, but something quieter, something she couldn't name. You're not like the others. He raised an eyebrow. Because I'm charming? Because you keep surviving things you shouldn't. Yeah, he said, wincing. That's kind of my thing. They sat across from each other in a quiet observation chamber, high above the central axis of the dreadnought. Outside the curved window, the stars looked closer than usual, shimmering threads pulled tight across the black. The ship drifted slowly in neutral orbit, its wounds bandaged but still sore. The Queen's armor had been reformed, subtly altered, less ornate, more functional. Eli's jumpsuit had a new sleeve and several scorch marks he now wore with something like pride. He tossed a ration bar from hand to hand. So, now what? You execute me with extra ceremony? Or do I just get filed away somewhere next to mildly useful annoyance? You're being transported to the Terran border station, she said, fingers steepled. There's been an agreement. Diplomatic negotiations are ongoing. Let me guess. I'm part of the goodwill package? Like a fruit basket, but with sarcasm. More like an expired snack that inexplicably fixed our fusion core. He leaned back in the chair. You know, for someone who once threatened to rearrange my molecules alphabetically, you're really warming up. I do not warm, she replied flatly. You almost smiled yesterday. I was yawning. No atmosphere in here, can't yawn in a vacuum. They let the silence settle for a while, but it wasn't tense anymore. Just present. He studied her. I'm guessing you don't do a lot of goodbyes. She looked toward the stars. Not ones that matter. Well, he said, standing up, allow me to be your first official, emotionally complicated farewell. I'd offer a hug, but I feel like that's a good way to lose an arm. I have disarmed more men for less. See? Now that's flirting. She stood as well. For a moment, neither moved. Then she reached out, palm facing up. He stared. Wait, was that a handshake? It is a Terran custom, yes? Yeah, but you skipped straight to the boss-level version. He took her hand. It was warm, surprisingly so. The shake was firm, unhurried. It lingered a moment longer than it needed to. I reviewed your file, she said. Before Vega 7, you were dishonorably discharged from your fleet for unauthorized modifications to navigation systems. Yeah, he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. Turns out military command doesn't appreciate spontaneous black hole avoidance. You altered protocols and saved 33 lives, and instead of praise, they exiled you. That's bureaucracy for you. If I'd let the ship explode, I'd have gotten a medal, posthumously. She studied him again, quieter now. We're not so different, you and I. Careful. That's how all the tragic romances start. You joke to deflect, she said, stepping back. But you changed something here. Not just the ship. He looked around. The walls pulsed less now. The ship, once tense and cold, felt almost attentive. I do have that effect, he said. Spaceships, vending machines, queens? Don't let it go to your head. I'll keep it between my ears where it belongs. He started to walk toward the transport bay, but halfway there, he paused. He turned. Hey, the question you never answered. She raised an eyebrow. That first day, I asked if you ever got tired of it, of interrogating, of always being in control. She didn't answer immediately. Then softly, I used to believe control was survival. And now I believe survival is more complicated than I thought. He nodded. Yeah, life tends to be messy, but it's the good kind of mess. The door slid open with a soft chime. He stepped inside, then glanced back one last time. You ever come to Earth, he said. Look me up. I'll buy you a drink. I don't drink Terran alcohol. Perfect, more for me. The door closed. Queen Jarella stood in silence, hands behind her back. Around her, the ship seemed to breathe easier. Somewhere deep in its core, a new subsystem began to hum, one based on a Terran schematic, messy, inelegant, and shockingly effective. She smiled, just barely, and this time, no one missed it.